Hello, let us discuss an important topic in bone called osteomyelitis. So, osteomyelitis, if you break up the word, it is osteomyelo and itis. So, itis means inflammation, myelo means marrow, and osteo means bone. Hence, the term osteomyelitis denotes inflammation of bone and bone marrow. Usually it is, more often than not, it is secondary to an infection. So sometimes along with osteomyelitis, you can get periosteal inflammation, which is called periostitis, or cortex inflammation, which is called osteitis. These are some of the types of osteomyelitis, namely pyogenic osteomyelitis, which is caused by various bacteria, granulomatous osteomyelitis, which are caused by a different set of organisms. Then there is syphilitic osteomyelitis caused by Treponema pallidum. And finally, there is chronic non-specific osteomyelitis. Out of these four topics, pyogenic osteomyelitis and granulomatous osteomyelitis, particularly tuberculous osteomyelitis, are important topics for exam. Let us now learn about pyogenic osteomyelitis. So, pyogenic osteomyelitis usually is caused by various organisms and in them particularly bacteria. The most common bacteria to cause osteomyelitis in adults is Staphylococcus aureus, and the most common bacteria to cause osteomyelitis in children and newborns is Haemophilus influenzae. Other bacteria like E. coli, Pseudomonas, Klebsiella, and group B Streptococci, Salmonella, these also can cause osteomyelitis. In the first slide, we saw that osteomyelitis is usually because of an infection. So this infection has to be reaching the bone from somewhere, right? So that is the focus of infection. So these are the foci of infection: skin, intestine, kidney, and lungs. So from these foci of infection, the bacteria has to spread to bone through certain pathways. So those are the routes of spread, namely hematogenous, that is blood spread. Then there is extension from contiguous site. Contiguous means which is in contact with, something like that. So if there is skin infection adjacent to a bone, then it is likely that the bone can get infected. So that is a good example for extension from contiguous site. And thirdly, direct implantation. Suppose a patient has an exposed fracture, then bacteria from the surface of his skin can be translocated into the bone. So that is an example for direct implantation. One more example is patient is undergoing some surgery and from outside the bacteria have been put on top of bone. So that is another example for direct implantation. Further, moving on to common sites which are involved by osteomyelitis. So if the spread is through blood, then the common bones affected are long bones, example femur, example humerus, or vertebral bodies. From contiguous site, the common bones to be involved are jaw and skull bones due to infections of teeth and infections of sinus, paranasal sinus. Bones at sites like toe and feet can undergo osteomyelitis if the patient is diabetic, because in diabetes, foot ulcer is one of the common manifestations. In this slide, we'll have a brief overview about the blood supply of a bone, in this case a long bone. So number one is the nutrient or medullary artery. This artery will enter the bone mid-shaft and it will progress on to become metaphyseal artery. So near the number 4 you can see multiple hairpin like bends. Bone also derives blood supplies from epiphyseal arteries, that is number 3, and metaphyseal arteries, which are number 2. The important parts for us to discuss osteomyelitis are arteries number 1 and 4. So consider the path from 1 to 4 as a road, and you're traveling from 1 to 4 in that road in a car. Which area are you likely to slow down the car at? So one area would probably be where the nutrient or medullary artery takes a bend and divides into two. The second area, which is more likely, is number 4, hairpin bends. So if you have traveled through the Western Ghats, you know that there are multiple hairpin bends and how carefully you have to drive through them, reducing the speed of the car, right? So this is the importance of knowing blood supply of bone in the pathogenesis of osteomyelitis. So 90 to 95% of the times the route of spread is through hematogenous way. So blood will obviously be slowing down at number 4, the hairpin bends. So if at all there is a considerable amount of bacterial load in the blood, as soon as blood slows down near number 4, bacteria will lodge there. So continuing from the previous slide, bacteria will lodge at the site of metaphyseal capillaries because there are sharp bends over there, and they will start growing at that site. As soon as bacteria start growing there, your body will mount a response to it by producing acute inflammation. And a part of inflammation is always exudate, the protein-rich fluid which accompanies the inflammation. Now, this inflammation keeps on progressing to produce more and more exudate. However, there is no way for the exudate to escape because the cortex of the bone is thick, right? So it keeps on building a pressure. At one point of time, what happens is this exudate will then percolate into the medullary cavity of the bone, also known as bone marrow. As the disease keeps on progressing, the exudate penetrates the endosteum, trickles through the canalicular system within the bone, which is the Haversian canals, and it reaches the periosteum to produce what is known as a subperiosteal abscess. To translate it, it is an abscess or collection of pus just below the periosteum. Here are two representative images of the mechanism we discussed till now. So the first is lodgement of bacteria. This was where those hairpin bends of capillaries or arterioles were there. In the second image, you are seeing the exudate building up. It percolates down into the medullary cavity, and also it traverses through the Haversian canal to come and lie below the periosteum, at which point it is called subperiosteal abscess. Now what happens, as more and more exudate keeps forming, this periosteum, that is the subperiosteal abscess that is collected, it will keep on lifting the periosteum from the surface of the bone. And in the blood supply, when we saw that the nutrient artery, it enters through the periosteum and then supplies blood to the bone, right? So if periosteum is lifted, it will disrupt the blood supply of that particular part of the bone, wherever that subperiosteal abscess is there. So if a particular segment of bone is void of its blood supply, naturally it will undergo death. So one part of bone dies off or gets necrosed, and this portion of the bone which gets necrosed, the name given for that is sequestrum. This is one of the hallmarks of acute osteomyelitis. Now histologically, when you see all these bone laying cells called osteoblasts, they are present adjacent to the periosteum. Okay, so when periosteum gets lifted up, these osteoblasts, what they will do is they'll start laying new bone, and the new bone thus formed is called involucrum. So these are the two terms you have to remember when you read about and write for exam about osteomyelitis. One is sequestrum, which is nothing but dead bone, and involucrum, which is reactive new bone formation. You can see the same mechanism in the images given below. In first image, what happens is the subperiosteal abscess has lifted up the periosteum, leading to rupture of blood vessels, and there is one hematoma collection there as well. Because of this disruption of the blood vessels, a part of bone has been deprived of blood supply, and hence it dies off or undergoes necrosis, and that portion of the bone which dies off is called sequestrum. Now because of this sequestrum, what happens is multiple holes or pores will be created at the cortex of the bone, right? So those holes or pores are called cloaca. In the second image, you are able to see cloaca, and also since the periosteum is being lifted up, osteoblasts will start laying new bone, which is called involucrum. It is identified by the green color in the image. Coming to clinical features of osteomyelitis, so the classic features include fever with chills and rigors. So high grade fever with chills and rigors. Apart from the systemic symptoms, the patient will also have local symptoms, which will be throbbing pain at the site, redness and swelling. Coming to the gross morphology of osteomyelitis. So the important things two important keywords which I told were, one is sequestrum, the other is involucrum. So in this image you are seeing a sequestrum, which is a fragment of bone with irregular margins which are brownish or blackish, and they are covered by pus. Microscopically again it's the same thing. So sequestrum is nothing but necrosed portion of a bone, right? So in the left side image you are able to see pinkish ribbon like material. In the center it appears, it also has pale pink stuff. So that is what is necrosis. And on the right side you are able to see numerous cells, polymorphs there, also known as neutrophils. So so many neutrophils are there, suggesting an acute inflammation. This pyogenic osteomyelitis can give rise to certain complications. So in this slide we'll see what those complications are. So the first is sinus formation. So the area at which subperiosteal abscess burst out, right? So that can lead to acute inflammation and exudate of the adjacent soft tissue, which may break through the skin, forming a hole there. So that is what a sinus is. So there can be a discharging sinus which puts out pus from the bone through the tract outside the skin. This sinus tract further has its own complications. So like in some patients, there can be tumors developing from the sinus tract like squamous cell carcinoma and such. The second complication is suppurative arthritis. So during the pathogenesis, we saw that the abscess collection, it trickles down into the bone marrow, right? The other possibility is that the abscess can go up and involve a joint, at which point it is called suppurative arthritis. And if there is an arthritis, the joint can undergo destruction, leading to something known as ankylosis. Ankylosis is basically the reduced mobility of a joint. If the osteomyelitis is close to the growth plate of a bone, then it can cause inflammation of the growth plate. If growth plate is inflamed, it will give rise to certain growth disturbances. This will give rise to what is known as limb length discrepancies. It can give rise to either shortening of a limb or lengthening of a limb. Any of the two are possible. The last complication is Brody's abscess. What happens is, if the exudate that you saw, which was forming during the pathogenesis of osteomyelitis, pyogenic osteomyelitis, if it gets walled off by a layer of granulation tissue, it will persist there for a long time and become chronic osteomyelitis. So this is what is Brody's abscess. Now we'll look into another topic, which is granulomatous osteomyelitis. A granuloma is a type of chronic inflammation which is composed of microscopic aggregates of epithelioid histiocytes. There can be many reasons for the development of granuloma. However, in the context of granulomatous osteomyelitis, it is mostly some of the infective organisms, namely tuberculosis, coccidioidomycosis, blastomycosis, syphilis, and brucellosis. The most important organism to cause granulomatous osteomyelitis is tuberculosis, which is the name of the organism is Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Let us talk about tuberculous osteomyelitis now. The organism you know is Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Risk factors for the development of tuberculous osteomyelitis include immunocompromised status, such as patients infected with human immunodeficiency virus, or patients suffering from diabetes mellitus which is uncontrolled, or elderly patients in whom the immune functioning is less. The focus of infection for tuberculous osteomyelitis is usually the lung or the gastrointestinal tract, and the route of spread is most of the times hematogenous. Common bones to develop tuberculous osteomyelitis are long bones, spine, that is vertebral bodies, bones of hip and knee joints, namely pelvis, femur, and tibia. Clinical features of tuberculous osteomyelitis are slightly different compared to pyogenic osteomyelitis. In pyogenic osteomyelitis, you saw there was high-grade fever with chills and rigors. In tuberculosis, however, it is low-grade fever with evening raise of temperature. If you give any MCQ exams, in any of the questions, if low-grade fever with evening raise of temperature is mentioned, then it is highly likely that you are dealing with tuberculosis. Gross morphology wise, there is not much difference between tuberculous and pyogenic osteomyelitis. However, in microscopy, instead of the numerous neutrophils that you saw along with the exudate in pyogenic osteomyelitis, here you will be seeing granuloma formation, because tuberculosis causes granulomatous osteomyelitis, right? So you are supposed to see a granuloma. Complications are more or less the same. One additional complication is deposition of amyloid material. So amyloidosis is an additional complication of tuberculous osteomyelitis. We discussed osteomyelitis in this class. In that categories you saw, most important ones were pyogenic osteomyelitis and tuberculous osteomyelitis. We compared some of the features of both of these osteomyelitis.